you don't have to download, but you need to use that Koala software to compile that to make it a regular CSS, right?
Yeah, Dreamweaver works there too.
I'm sorry?
Dreamweaver compiles it as well.
Well, there are several. I mean, VS Code has also extensions, but Koala is kind of the easiest way right now, so we can go off. If you have different setup on your personal, in your development environment on your computer, you can use anything. We just need that SCSS to be compiled or processed to regular CSS. That's the whole thing, the whole goal. So here I showed you can use this mockup here to set up like a starting project structure. So we have several folders in our root. We have assets which will hold images for now and later can hold I don't know, fonts or any assets for your site. CSS will have these two files which will be generated by Koala. So we will not generate CSS. That's something that Koala will do for us. And then our SCSS folder will hold all our SCSS files, which will be the ones that are starting with underscore are called partials. So those are all just parts of our SCSS code that will at the end get combined into one, and Koala will make its CSS file. So it will just help us organizing things, and you will see when we set them up. And then our regular index.html. So this is very basic project setup, but from here you can start adding your files in the right places, and it's set up to be scalable, and it will be organized no matter the size of the project. So let's jump right there into our project. So another thing that we didn't do last time was GitHub, and you all were submitting GitHub your code into GitHub repository, which we want to do. And for example, for this week you create your final project and your final repository, and then every week you just add to that same one. You don't have to create new one every time. That's why repository exists, to use it and submit the code that you extend to that same repository, right? And for example, I jump in and help you out, I submit to the same repository my code, and that's how that's why we are using it. So last time we didn't do anything with GitHub. This time we'll start doing that. So very basic. I have nothing right now, no project anywhere. So our software that we said we're gonna use, or little GUI that will help us, is GitHub for desktop. Let me just remove this. And we downloaded that on first class or second class. I think first time, right? I don't know if you guys were using this or you were submitting straight to GitHub on the website. I hope you all were using this, right? Yeah. So let's say we start a new project, so we want to create a new project here. I'm gonna click create new repository, and here it asks me for name, so I'm gonna say portfolio, something like that. Let's say portfolio. You can name it however you want. Here on the location, on local path, you say where do you want this repository, or imagine like folder, where do you want that to be created. So for right now I'm just gonna use desktop. You can choose your wherever you're storing your stuff. You can click this, initialize this repository with readme file. Readme file is something that shows up on the bottom when you open GitHub and you open your repository. There is a little file that usually that's where you give instructions to people how to use your project, or what is the project about. Yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
When we use the GitHub desktop version,
Okay.
because sometimes I'm using this computer, sometimes I'm using
Mhm.
the iMac at home, do we have to make sure that the local path is consistent? And the only reason I ask is because, I think I trouble in one of my projects. That's why I was like trying to like, oh my goodness, let me go back and take away this computer.
Local path doesn't matter. What it matters is your remote repository in GitHub, right? So you want to, you want to commit your stuff to that same one remotely. So GitHub is the remote server, right? It's something that lives on internet. So that's where you store your stuff. This is where you're storing stuff locally, so you can have it in different path in this computer or different path on this computer. But whatever you work there or here or on the other computer, you submit that code to the same place on the internet, and that's where your base code is, right?
So basically, because I did notice that, I was like playing with the system and have Flex 1, Flex 2, Flexbox 2, and I was like, okay, which one is it? So because I know that in one of them, my local pathway was a cloud server with Adobe Creative Cloud, and then the other one was, the USB. So that's why I guess what you're telling me is it doesn't matter as long as you can access the code, you can revise it, you can make modifications. That's okay.
Yes, and then you need to submit to the same repository on GitHub, right? So this is only locally right now, but when we click push later, push to the remote repository, that's when this code from our computer gets sent to that on GitHub on internet, right? Remote, and then you can access that remote one from anywhere, from any other computer, and then you keep or I can download your repository work and push stuff to that remote. So that remote one will be, the base code or the house for our code, and then everyone that works on that can pull it down on their own computers. So that's how a group of developers work together. So we have remote repository somewhere on GitHub, or there are others like Bitbucket, but we are using with GitHub right now. And then so we are all working on the same project. Let's say we want to create this page, but all of us. So I'm gonna be doing navigation, but you're gonna be doing this. He's gonna be doing the cartridges. So we all gonna pull the original folder, the original project structure from GitHub down to our computer, and then I'm gonna be working on this part. As soon as I'm done, I'm gonna push it to that remote repository, and then you can, on your own computer, you can pull and see those changes on yours, and that's how you do with your code. And that's at the end, we merge all our work together, and GitHub makes sure that there's no conflicts. Like I didn't touch your code, you didn't touch my code, and everything gets merged together, and then at the end we have the whole page. We all work together, everything gets together, and everything lives in one place on the remote server. But you can always use this. For example, in this example, you can use this software or this little program to interact with that remote repository, to pull stuff down and then to work and then push them back up. But in our case right now, it will be simple because you're the only one that will be working on this. So, but it's always good to use versioning, because in case you mess something up, so let's say you work the whole day and you mess everything up, so you can really easily, and you touched 100 files today, and you can't really go back and remember everything that you changed to go through the files. You will forget something for sure. So what GitHub can help you is just revert back to the situation 100 files before, right? Last time that everything worked, and you can revert back and forward, and it's great stuff. It's hard to describe it to people that are not familiar with it, especially if you are the only one working. You don't see the point in it, but it's very, very good, and it's very required if you want to work as developer anywhere. That's what I'm gonna ask you for sure. You have to know how to use versioning, code versioning, GitHub or Bitbucket, but the whole idea is the same, whatever system you're using. So that's, I would recommend you. We will do a little bit here as introduction, but you will have to kind of watch. There's tons of videos and blogs and tutorials. You can extend your knowledge on top of it.
Do
But
you want us to include you as a contributor in the final project?
I'm sorry? What is it?
Are we gonna add you as a contributor?
You
for the
can.
final project?
Yeah,
If
we
you're
are.
gonna go in there and modify, it's probably,
We can do that if you set up your final project, and let's say like Rihanna asked me, she needs help with the with footer. I can go in and pull her repository on my computer so I can see what's going on, and then I can make changes and push to her repository, because our repositories will be public, so anyone can pull down and do stuff. In work environments, the repositories are private, and you are given access to certain things, But right now we're gonna GitHub. You can have it for free only public. Or you can have for free only public repositories. But Bitbucket, if you use Bitbucket, which is same thing, uh, you can have private repositories for free. So I like Bitbucket a lot, but GitHub is the biggest one. So.
GitHub does have like a school program. I don't know if you guys looked into it. They have like a
It's a teacher and students kind of setup. Classroom, I think it's called.
yeah, where you can get free private repositories.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's called Classroom, I think.
Yeah.
It was just a little more setup. I didn't want to, confuse you guys. And you will be working on for example, a lot of times if you go to on interview for some web development or web developer position, they might ask you, do you have GitHub, and they asking you that because they want to go see your projects, because it's very good if you do something and you want to share with everybody else, you just submit it to GitHub, leave it public, and have it there, and if it's something cool, or you can have snippets, and it's called Git gists and stuff like that. But for right now, we'll just create a simple new repository, which right at this point it's all on our computers. Nothing is online. I named it portfolio. I selected desktop in my case. You can select any folder on your computer. So when I click, I'm gonna select this to create this file for me, like the original just starting point. When I click create repository, this will create a folder named portfolio on my desktop, but it will be a GitHub repository, which will track everything that we do inside that folder. It will be tracked here. We can see all the changes, all the new files, all the new folders that we create, and at the end, the good practice is to do those pushes to the remote repository as often as you can. So every time you do something significant or something meaningful, you commit your changes. That will allow you later on, if you break something, you can go back like 5 minutes ago and start over, kind of.
Is there a limit in the history that it allows, or there's no limit?
No, you can do as much as you want, and it's very fast. It's pretty cool stuff. You'll see now as we go. So I click create repository, and it opened it here. It's now empty, right? We didn't put anything inside that folder. So it created a folder, and it's in its repository now. So our little software here, or Git, will start tracking changes. So I'm gonna go in my VS Code, and I'm gonna add this. I'm going to add. Oh, come on! I don't see. So I'm gonna add that folder to my workspace.
so I did that and uploaded everything, and now it's saying that my HTML and CSS are deleted from the disk.
So you removed that folder from GitHub for desktop for that from here. You had it here originally, and then you clicked right click and you delete it from there, right?
Just on my actual thing, it's like I tried to pull up my website that I was working on, and now it's saying deleted from disk.
Somehow you deleted it. I don't know how.
I haven't
But-
touched it since then. Okay.
Well, this will not touch your anything.
But like, say if I drop the folder in there,
Here my folder is already here, and you'll see now. I wanna add really quick this folder to my workspace, and I'll see what you'll see what I'm talking about. What is this? let's see, add folder to workspace. There we go. So my desktop, and this is portfolio folder that I just created with GitHub for desktop, and GitHub for desktop, that little software created that README file for me, which is nothing but just the name of my website, of my project. So that's the starting point. So right now, first file we create, like always, we're gonna do our starting point, which is index.html, and I'm gonna generate quickly just a boilerplate that we always do. Portfolio, it's my title, and I'm gonna save this. So I save this, and you see Visual Studio Code has integration with GitHub. So my new files that I haven't been pushed to my repository, so I haven't committed my changes, they're green. As soon as I kind of commit that's the final change I'm making, it will become gray. So it just gives you a little bit visually, it's helping you tracking your work. So if we go back to our GitHub for desktop, you can see that this index.html showed up here, and it's all green because all these lines here are new, and this file is new, so it's starting to track our work. And
is that because you put the .git attributes?
that's because I created it originally. When I clicked create new repository, I started the whole process here, right? Let me see, where is it? Oops, sorry. So if I go here to new repository, that's what I did earlier. And as soon as I created that folder as repository, this software will track everything I do inside that folder, right? Make sense?
So you have to have something in Visual Code first before the, or not necessarily in the
You have
repository?
option to add your local repositories if you already have projects started, but this is the starting from scratch. You can just go and create new repository, which will then create that folder, and it will be empty. But behind the scenes, that folder will be tracked. Everything you do inside will be tracked here, right? So that's your starting point.
So the repository folder is your project folder?
Yes, exactly. It's folder, regular folder, but in the behind the scenes, it's now being tracked.
Well, I didn't do that. I just dragged it into it, and then it's probably where I got deleted or something. Alright.
Probably, yeah, because you need to create it. You need to tell it that this folder now is my repository. Repository is same as folder, but the only difference between regular folder and call it repository is that repository is being tracked what you're doing, and regular folder is just like files in and out. You know what I mean? So I'm not sure how you got them deleted, but it didn't do them by itself, right? You probably clicked something or something happened in meantime.
Just following the tutorial.
Are you saying you put like you made your files in here and then you moved them into the GitHub folder? Like you made
Yes,
GitHub folder?
into the repository.
Okay, so what I'm thinking might happen.
So this is some file that is, what is this?
Okay, so what it might be?
So far makes sense.
Yeah. So
We did that last year all with the
Yeah,
command
I think
lines.
happened with me is that my computer has this
what
one
I'm
has a
thinking might
small
happen
memory, everything is
if this
synchronized to
saved as a
OneDrive,
workspace, it's
and I
literally
think that's why I wasn't
files.
able to see it like
And
in the
if you-
Git
if
when
you
I was
took
trying
those
to
files
pick it
and
up.
Well, maybe, but there are two things to remember. Right now, I'm working in my folder on my computer, right? I just track the work, so it shows up here. Everything I do is gonna show up here. As soon as I go here and click publish repository, this will then
Show it.
kind of imagine copy that folder that I'm tracking and save it online on GitHub. And that's the URL that I was asking you guys to give me, right, every time. And that's a remote repository that I can go and access. I cannot access your computer, right? So the only way I can see code from your computer if you copy it there or push it to that repository, and then I can see it and download it, right? So that's a workflow for a lot of people working on the same thing. But it can also be used by individual people, right? So you can share with public, right? You can share with everyone something that you created. So I just keep going because I want to cover a lot about Sass. So we started our our folder or our index.html, and
I have a question.
yes, go ahead.
Like my other stuff is showing up under the file I opened. Like I did a new folder,
Mm-hmm.
a new like a sauce folder, so for this new project. And then, but when I bring it up,
So you can have several.
it shows
Several-
all my other stuff under it.
Yes, you can have if you click on this arrow
No, not
right
in
here.
GitHub.
Oh, in your
On-
VS Code.
Yeah,
Eh,
because you do add folder to workspace. Or
yes,
That's how you begin.
yes, that's how you're gonna add that folder to your Visual Studio Code. So you can have here in your list, but you can have multiple folders. So that's probably what you did. You probably have other folders too, which I removed mine. I'll come over and take a look at your
Yeah,
stuff.
because my
Bringing this back. So it's empty, and I'm gonna do add folder. Oops, not this. I'm gonna add my folder to my workspace, and it shows my index.html. So we are back to where we were before. So you'll see in the module in the canvas, you'll see the folder structure that we're gonna be working on, and right now I'll pull it up. So we'll do like last time, and you will have your CSS folder where we will have style.css file, and so far you were writing all your styling into that style.css, but from now on we're gonna write into our SCSS files, and we will have Koala to put everything that we write into that style.css. We did this last time in class, so it should be a little more familiar to you. So all our Sass Sass is the extension of CSS, but all the files have extension SCSS. So that's might be a little bit confusing, but that's what it is. It's called Sass, but extension is SCSS, and that will become CSS. So it's a lot of SSCC stuff like that. So it will get more clear as you're doing it more often. So this will in this SCSS folder we will create all our CSS files or SCSS files, and then inside this SCSS folder we will start organizing our styling files. So we will have folder called, for example, called modules, and inside that folder we will create parts of our stylings. For example, one file will be only for colors that we will use on in our site. The other one will be for typography, for our fonts and things like that. So the next folder will be partials, and you will see what we will put here. We will put all single files that will do also our stylings, but we will name them meaningfully to us so we can get organized easier. You can write all this into one file, but I'm telling you for sure, as your project grows, that file will be so confusing that you will lose track what you're doing.
So you want us to do the modules and the partials under the SCSS?
Inside
folder?
SCSS folder, yes. So here inside these modules and partials folders, inside we will have SCSS files. And then another one that we're gonna have is called vendor, and we'll do this first because it's something that we will copy from internet. We're not gonna do anything with this file. And
No,
then
so is that the vendor folder that you had us do on the first, or is that
this vendor folder now in this case it's related to our SCSS work.
Okay.
You can have the other vendor that was part of the root,
Right.
where you would put
Okay.
jQuery, Bootstrap, all that other stuff. But here in SCSS, everything that we do here, it will be related to SCSS stuff. So vendor, before we continue, so those are our 3 folders inside SCSS, and then something that is gonna connect all these folders and files together. We will name, you can name it any way you want, but we will name it main.scss. So inside our SCSS folders, all the files will have extension SCSS, and as soon as we use this extension, we can write advanced CSS stuff, which we'll start doing right now, which are variables, mixins, or functions, and everything that you cannot do in regular CSS. And that's why I want to share with you guys, because you're gonna love it. You'll see that's great. You know, you can do a lot of stuff easier and faster, and it's just better for bigger projects, and it's kind of becoming a standard. So I want you to get familiar with it. So this main.scss will put everything together at the end, and then we will tell our Koala to compile this file and make it style.css. So we need to link in our page, we need to link our CSS file, which is inside our CSS folder. This is the same as we did last time. So we are linking our CSS file here, but so far you were writing directly into this file. This, from now on, we won't be writing here. Koala will do that for us. So we loaded our style.css, we created our folders. So the next thing we will do, it's called normalize.css, and normalize is you have the link in module. I'll show you here. Let's take a look at the GitHub for desktop real quick, and you can see that it tracks everything we do, right? You see that it added all the files. It's seeing what's going on there, so it's being tracking for us. Good. So here there is in reading normalize.css. I put the link here, and this will open this website. And if you click on download, it will open the file that we're gonna copy. But before we do that, just to let you know what normalize.css is, it's basically somebody has written some CSS big file that looks like this, and you can see all the styles and border, bottom, none, whatever. But what this doing for us is normalizing every browser to start from the same kind of point. Because, for example, if you say in your HTML, if you say input field, you know, that tag in HTML tag input, it will look differently, slightly differently if you open it in Internet Explorer, or you open it in Safari, or you open it in Chrome. It will look different if you open it on Android phone and you open it on iPhone. So your styles that you will be working, it might look good on your computer, in your browser, but it might look different on your browser, on your computer, right? So to kind of stay ahead of that, you will set up these normalize styles first, so it sets all browsers on the same page. So everything, all the extra spaces that maybe Internet Explorer will show, they will not be there. So all the browsers will be the same, and you don't have to do anything but just copy this file and include it in your styles. in front of everything else. So it's like starting point. So the way you do that, you click download, it opens this big file that we don't even want to care what is there. You can go and see, you know, what is all the tags that they used here, but you don't have to if I just told you what it's going to do for you. So
Is it the same as when it's rendering the page, like depending on the width and the pixel, or no?
it will
More of
fix
a-
it will fix some empty spaces and some stuff that comes with browser itself, right? Every browser has separate a way of rendering things, and some, like Internet Explorer does different borders, for example, on certain elements. So you don't want to have anything to, you kind of want to set everything the same way, so only your styles from then on will be applied, and they will show up the same on all of the browsers. So it's kind of great starting point, and a lot of people forget to do that, and then they open their page on iPhone and they see that the button doesn't look the same as on Chrome, and you were like, why is that? Well, that's why, because every browser and every device pretty much has their own little things that are under the hood that you can't control really, but people are writing these helper things, files for us that we can use to start. And there is a lot of normalized.css files out there. They're pretty much doing the same thing. Some of them maybe have a little more stuff, but the link I provided for you here is great, and it will do the trick. So you want to select all these. I'm going to use Control A or Command A. I'm going to copy these files, this content here, and I want inside my vendor folder, inside my SCSS folder, I will create a file that is going to be called that's not right, normalize.scss, right? And here I'm gonna paste everything I just copied, and I'm gonna save that, and that's all I'm gonna do right now. So I downloaded that file, right? Or I saved the contents of that. So
Let
we
me make sure, I'm sorry.
Yes.
So under the vendor, you have the main.scss
No.
you also have, or no?
no,
Under the
main
vendor?
is the same.
Got it, okay. I
You
got
see
it.
how it's indented a little bit?
Got it,
So that shows you the nesting part. So SCSS contains modules, partials, vendor, and the file main.css. So that's all in the same level, right? So let's write a little bit. I'm gonna try to give example. Bless you. So let's do our h1 and then howdy class, and then let's use our live server that we were doing before. So I think this will give us, so there is this h1 that we just did, nothing fancy. I hope, we'll see. But let's put this this normalized now that we saved here, is we don't call it anywhere. Our style.css are empty. Nothing's going on right now. So what we want to do is to open Koala first, so we can tell Koala how to work with our SCSS stuff, right? So I have this flexbox from last class. I'm gonna remove this. So Koala is now empty. I'm gonna add my project to Koala, and this is what we did last time. Should be familiar to you. My folder is on desktop called portfolio. When I select it, Koala kind of looks through and finds some CSS files and all that stuff. So right now, the only file I'm concerned about is main.scss. We don't worry about any other files, because inside main.scss we will import everything else. So we just gonna click to this file, uncheck compass mode, so we avoid some that's a little bit advanced. Compass mode it requires additional installation of something, so we won't be using that now. We want to uncheck it. The source map, we will say to use it, because we'll see later. I'll show you by the end of the class why that's useful to have it.
How do you bring up the sidebar again?
This one,
Yeah.
I clicked on plus. I clicked on this plus right here to add the folder, and I selected my project.
No, I mean like, 'cause
Oh,
there's
I
this,
clicked on the file.
Oh, okay.
If you click on file, it shows up on the side. So I want to set up how I'm gonna compile this main.scss file. So I say auto compile, which means as soon as I save something, it will auto compile for me. So I don't have to open Koala again and click compile every time. And for now, we'll keep this nested just so we can see what's going on. And once we are kind of okay with everything, we can say, okay, be compressed. And this will make everything into one line. It will remove extra spaces. It will remove all the unnecessary stuff that we don't really need in our compile file.
Is
And
there a difference if you start out first with compress, or it is better just to do
it doesn't matter. I mean, compressed is the best for production because you want that file to be compressed as much as you want, because this will affect the output file,
Yeah.
which is our style.css.
But it's not gonna affect as far as the styling and putting
No,
in
no,
the
no.
CSS.
It's just removing extra spaces, so it makes that file to be smaller, so our browsers can load it faster, so our page can be faster, pretty much. And combining all these files into one also works for your page or site will be faster because it will make only one request to download that style file, right? Because if you have a lot of them, when someone comes to your page, that server wherever you have your page hosted needs to download all these files separately, and that takes time. But if you combine them into one and put them as one file, it will just download one file, and you have all your styles there. Because when you have a lot of stuff, that can load like half a second, for example. That's a lot of loading time. So you want to work ahead of time, and also is for organization of your project to be more organized, and you'll see a lot more benefits as we go. So the last thing we need to do is to set output path to this file. So that we did last time. So we need to tell Koala, okay, as soon as I save this file, where do you want me to save it? So we want to save it as that style.css, right? So I click on set output path. I go to my project. Here's my portfolio, and this is my CSS folder that we created earlier. And inside we created that style.css. So I need to click on it. So I save it as this name because this is the file I'm referencing in my index.html. And I click save because I already have it. It's gonna ask me, you sure you want to replace it? I said yes. And now Koala will auto compile and do everything as I go. So
I have a quick question.
yes.
Because I've experienced it, I think mostly on my Windows, but has anybody else encountered that if you don't put the Koala immediately, that it freezes, you have to shut down the computer, restart again? Have you been having those problems or no?
No,
Oh,
not really,
it's
but
something.
it might be
Because I've
to
had
the
do
operating
that, like, if
system
it
or
doesn't-
something.
I'm click on the Koala application desktop version, and it doesn't, so I'm always having to shut down the computer.
Oh,
and
it
start
check in
again.
your taskbar, like by your clock on the bottom right. Are you having Windows or what you have?
Yeah, I think I've noticed it mostly with the Windows computer, that in order for me, because if I click on it and if I don't do anything to it, it just kinda like falls
Freezes up?
asleep and it doesn't reactivate after like 5-10
Yeah,
minutes.
that's related to operating system, I guess, or the version of, I'm not sure why is that. Might be a bug in Koala. Yes.
I just wanted to make sure.
Mhm.
When you set output path, you set it to the style.css.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
So I'm saying this SCSS
Mhm.
file, my main SCSS file, I need to tell Koala where to save it. So when you say set output path, basically you're saying, okay, take this file, compile it to the regular CSS, and save it as style.css. And now we will start writing some examples just so you can see what actually is going on. So in our main.scss right now it's empty, right? So at the same time our style.css is empty because we didn't do anything to it. So basically what we told Koala is to save everything from here, compile it, and save it in style.css. So let's make sure that's true. So we're gonna save our body, our body to have background. It's hard to watch up there. And then let's say that perfect yellow color. And as soon as I save, so I click Control S, you can see that my Visual Studio Code shows me this green, which means that something new is there that I haven't been tracked in GitHub yet. So Koala compiled this, which is regular CSS at this point. I didn't do anything right now that it's not CSS. So it saved it into my style.css. And you see it just rearranged it a little bit because I said nested, so it nesting it differently. But basically I didn't do anything to style.css. Koala just grabbed this, made it there, and then if we go and open our page, that style has been applied now because it's inside style.css. So right now we are sure that our main.css is doing what it's supposed to do. So we can write our styles here now. And the benefit that we are getting now is that we can start using SCSS functionalities for this.
What's the style.css.map? Did that just compile by itself?
Yes, that it creates this file, and it will because we're gonna use several partial files. When style.css gets compiled, everything is smashed into one, right? So if you have something that doesn't look right and you wanna go and find it, where is it in your styles? Since you have a lot of files here, later on you will have multiple files. You don't really know where. Maybe you don't remember where is that exactly. So style.css.map, when you go inside Chrome, it will tell you in what exact file that this style is written. So I hover over body, which opens my styles for this element, and you can see here it says main.scss on line number 1. If I don't have that map, it will just tell style.css. But later on, my style.css will be huge file mixed with bunch of stuff, and you will be kind of having trouble finding that exact place. So it's very handy to have it there. It doesn't hurt anything. It doesn't slow your site or anything. It just mapping, just tells you where stuff are located. So let's save this again, this main.scss as empty, and everything cleared out, right? Because Koala is compiling in the backend automatically as soon as we save. So let's say this is our amount of work that we are good with so far. We go to our GitHub for desktop and we see that everything's being tracked that we did so far. There is our index. Everything else, this is not our normalized. Green here means that those are new lines of code that we added. So we want this now to save and push to that remote GitHub repository. So it's very easy using this software. You just click publish to publish repository, and it says underneath, it says publish this repository to GitHub, which is remote location, right? So I click that. It's gonna ask me how you want that remote one to be named, because it doesn't have to have the same name, but it's a good practice to have it the same name so you don't lose track what you're doing. If I have this checked, this is not available for free, so I cannot have private repository on GitHub for free. So I'm gonna uncheck this right now. You can add description if you want. Right now I won't do anything, and I'm gonna click publish repository. Now it's getting this folder that we were working on so far, and it pushed it to remote repository, and that remote repository we can go now to github.com. I'm logged in with my account, and you can see right here, portfolio repository is saved. And is this the one? Where is it? Why the commit? Oh, I missed the whole step there. So I created the folder there, but before you can push stuff to repository, you need to say here, you need to tell it which files you want to send to online, because maybe you don't want to send all the files right now. Maybe you want to send 2 files, and then you're still working on 2, and you're gonna send them later. But you see these checkboxes right here, so by default they're all checked. So once they're checked like this, I need to commit them, which is like, okay, I'm done with this, I want to send them to the remote repository. And to do that, it's simple click of a button, but you need to say some message and use this message for your own reference later on. So for example, this is our initial work, so I'm gonna give message initial commit. So once I do this, click commit to master. That's my only branch I have. Don't worry about branches. Just click commit to master, and right now all the files disappeared from here. So they are not deleted right now. But I said that I'm done with changing these files, and I commit those changes. But this is all still happening only locally, only on my own computer. If we go back to our Visual Studio project, here you can see all the files are here. The only difference, they're not green anymore, which means I committed those changes. So I kind of did a snapshot of this particular moment right now. So everything I did so far, I kind of saved this state. So later on, by the end of the class, we work on some stuff, and we say, oh, this is all crap, I want to come back to this state. I'm gonna be able to say, okay, I want to go back to this snapshot I did right now, right? Make sense? Okay. So we want to do the same. So now we committed all these files, and we want to push them to that remote repository. So we want to, when I say push them to remote repository, means like grab them, copy them, and save them online. That's pretty much what it's doing. So I'm gonna click this, and everything that I committed, it's being now pushed or saved online. And it should now, when I go to my GitHub, my account, and I refresh, and here you can see all the files that we are created so far, right? If I click index, there is my code that we have on our local computer. So now this remote folder, let's say, or repository is synced with my local work. And now I can continue to work. I'm on airplane, for example, and I want to work on my project, but I don't have internet. That's okay. I can keep working on my project locally, commit those changes here, say when I change something, it will show up here. Let's do that actually. Let's say I want to add paragraph here. That's a lot of work, but anyway, that's just example. So I want to add this paragraph. What was the control Z? No. So I added the paragraph. I'm gonna save the file. I'll go back to this GitHub for desktop, and you can see that it marked this new line, 2 lanes of code, because it recognizes my previous, how my file looked previously to this change, and it's showing me the only difference that I made to this file. And now I want to say, okay, I want to commit this change. I'm gonna do added a paragraph, and I'm gonna commit to master. Right now I'm still on my airplane, but I saved this. I created a new snapshot of my work, and as soon as I get online, I'm gonna click publish to to publish to online repository, and then now if I go to my GitHub and I click, it says there is the message I create. That's why we're making this message, so we can see these files are the same as we didn't change them. So the last time we changed them was this message. That was the first time we pushed them. Right now we only changed this file and it tells you like 21 seconds ago, and this is the message that we put for our own kind of tracking purposes. And if we open this index.html, you can see there is the paragraph now. It's there. So we synced our work online and locally again. So this is the workflow that you will be doing to track your work and sync your online local public repository with your local work. And that makes a lot of sense when you're working with other people. So it's just good to start doing it right now by yourself, and then you will be familiar when you go and get a job, and then there are other developers and they say, okay, this is the project we're working on. They're gonna give you GitHub URL, and you go, you download that to your computer, you work on your stuff that they told you to do, and you commit your changes and you push them to that same repository. And somebody who is whatever lead or your team, he's gonna go and review your changes and say, okay, this is good, that's good to go. And that's how you work. That's the workflow that you will face if you go to web development industry. So that's when it comes. That's all that we're gonna be doing with GitHub and GitHub for Desktop, that software. Nothing else we will change by the end of the class. But you will have to keep track of your work like this, same way we just did now. So let's go back to our main thing, which is SCSS. So one great thing that SCSS gives us are variables. So let's build a little bit of markup here. Let's create, right now I'm not worrying about having proper HTML structure. You already know that from last 2 classes ago. So when you work on your project, make sure you have those right. But right now for just examples, I'm just gonna create simple divs so you guys can see what's going on. So I'm gonna create div that it's gonna have let's say class box, press tab, and this box will have I'm a box text. If we open that our page, where is it? Right here. There is our h1, this is our paragraph, and this is I'm a box right here. That div doesn't have anything, right? And so let's add some. Right now we're working in our main.scss. So we said we added this div with a class of box. So we're gonna select that element. And we're gonna say, okay, I want you to have width of 200 pixels. I want you to have height of 200 pixels. And I want you to have background color of, let's make some aqua, right? Let's say that Koala is still running in the background, so it should do all the work that it needs to do. And this is our box right here that it's 200 by 200 pixels, and it has this color in the back. So let's say now we create another same element with the same class, but I'm second box. So now since they have the same class, this second box should have the same styles, right, as the first one. So you can see, let's add some margin around them so we can separate them a little bit. So if we see margin 15 pixels, this will add margin all around the boxes. So you can see there is margin of 15 pixels on top, on the left, on the right. So right now we by using the same class for both elements, they're getting the same styles, right? But if we go and name this second class something else, second box, now it has different class that doesn't have styles, so it's empty, right? Nothing. So let's write, we want that one second box, that class to have exactly the same styles, so they are same, but we are rewriting the code here. We are writing same things twice. Why would we do that? That's not good. There is one term that it's called dry, and it means do not repeat yourself. And that's like, you don't want to write, if you find yourself writing code, the same things over and over in your code, it's probably, there is a probably way to not do that, right? So there's no sense to write the same things over and over. And here we are writing, especially what I wanted to show you is we are writing the same color. So let's say our boss comes in and say, or the designers come in and they say, oh, we want this aqua color to actually be navy color now, which is like dark blue. So you need to go and replace it. So right now you will have to come here and say, okay, I want this color to be navy, and then you gotta go to the second one and do navy. So you're gonna have to change it on, let's say 100, you have 100 elements like this. You're gonna have to go and change it to 100 places, and you're probably gonna forget where some, and they're gonna come back to you again and say, this is messed up, you didn't do a good job and all that stuff. So this is not good way of doing things, right? Because we are just writing things, repeating ourselves for no reason. So SCSS or Sass helps us with that we can use variables, and variables are defined like you start with $, similar to JavaScript. If you had JavaScript or some other language, PHP, usually variables start with $, and then we can name this variable anything we want. So we're gonna name it, let's say, blue color, and our blue color at this time is navy. So we basically save this value of the color, or let's pick, what Visual Studio Code gives you when you're working with colors, when you hover over the color, it gives you this nice color picker. So we can select some color here, and it gives us the RGB values right there. It writes them for us, so we don't have to go to Photoshop and do the select color and get the hexa values and all that stuff. So it's pretty cool. So let's say this is the color we want, and we want this color to be applied to both these classes. So you just get this variable name, and instead of writing your color, you're just gonna write the variable name. So you say, I want my background color to be this variable. Make sense? If I save this and go back, both boxes have this color. So this variable thing, it's not possible in regular CSS. So you can't do that. If you write this in your regular CSS, it will not do anything. So it's only possible if you're using Sass or less. So if you go to our style.css now, you see that it replaced those variables with actual values. For us, we didn't have to do that. But why is this so useful is your boss comes in and say, okay, I want these boxes to be yellow now. So now you have to change only the values only in one place, right? So you're gonna just come here and say, okay, I want this to be yellow. And now, since we are using variables here, both these values will be replaced with yellow. We save, we go back, and that's it, right? So imagine hundreds of those. So we need only to replace that value in one place, and it will be replaced everywhere else that we are calling this blue color. Make sense so far? Yes, no? Yes? Okay, I hope so. So that's variables, and you can use it for tons of stuff. Anything that you are will be pretty much anything in CSS, but you want to use them. They make sense where you are using certain property on multiple places. So you want to save that as a variable, and then later on, if you need to change it, you just change it in one place. And the starting points are always the color, your font sizes, all that stuff that you will write the most often. You will save them in variables. So colors you will be using all over your website. Font sizes you will use everywhere also. So that's always case, and you will find other stuff as you starting to write your CSS. As soon as you repeat things, there you go. That's your trigger that you can save that property as a variable and just use it that way. So we can write our variables directly here into main.css. Let's say we have font size, or yes, we can name it like default font size. And these variable names, try to name them. There are different naming conventions that you should use, but for now, just think of naming these variables with something that's gonna make sense to you when you go and you use them later on in your code. So for example, this default font size will make sense to me if I want to use it. If later on I want to say this element here, this section, the font size of this section will be default size of that I declared earlier, I'm gonna say, okay, font size for this section will be default font size variable, and that's gonna be, let's say, 16 pixels. So so right now, if I want, for example my that first box text, which is this text right here, I want it to be 25 pixels. So I'm gonna say font size 25 pixels. And then here, my font size on the second one, I want to be my default font size. So I'm just gonna write default font size. So this will be replaced with 16, right, in my CSS. But I can reuse this variable to any other elements later on in my page as my page grows, or my project, any other page. You can use the same variables. So if I go here, you see my first box is 25, and the second one, if you use your inspector tool, you can see here that it's font size being replaced with 16 pixels, because that's the value of that variable. Cool. Makes sense, right? Okay, so we will have our let me see something. We will have our colors as a partial. So we don't want to clog our main.scss. If we write everything in main.scss, then we are doing the same thing if we would have write in the other CSS. So we don't make any organizational improvements to our project. So let's say we want separate place or separate file only for our colors. And we know every time we want to change color, we know where to look right away. We don't have to scan through the whole styles sheet. You know, we're gonna go straight to that file. So in our partials, let's create a new file that is going to be a partial. And the way we declare partials, their name needs to start with underscore. So I'll name it underscore, and makes sense to name it colors. And then the extension again is gotta be s.scss. So right now our main.css CSS that it's getting compiled to our style.css doesn't know about this file. So I want my colors, which is right now I only have one variable. I wanna declare it here, but now my main.css or main.scss will not know about this variable because it's actually this color, because it lives in another file. So the way you do that, here we will have to import this partial file that we just created. So the way you import stuff, you will say at import, and then you say where, in a single quotes, you say where is that input file. So it's inside partial folder, and then as soon as I hit / Visual Studio Code helps me, and it shows me whatever files I have inside that folder, and right now this is the only one. So this way now our main.scss file has imported whatever we write in this colors file. So our variable that is named blue color, that is defined here, is now available to this file. So this second box will have this color. And the way you can see that that all gets compiled together, if you open your style.css, you can see that everything got replaced with this, the variables got replaced with their values, and everything is in place. But for us, we separated our work, so we know exactly where we're gonna declare our colors, and we imported them in our main.scss.
Is that a semicolon or a colon?
Here, here,
Yeah.
that's the same icon.
What did you put in the colors dot SCSS again?
So my variable, here I'm gonna set all the variables for all the colors. So for example, I can do, the next one will be primary, oh my goodness, primary button, and primary button color will be let's say that navy color, that it's dark blue. So now in my main.scss, let's say I'm gonna let's create a button in our index.html. So I'm gonna create a button that has a class of button, let's say, for now. I'm a button. So if we open our page, you see here, this is the button without styles. So this is actually a good time now to import our normalized SCSS that we created at the very beginning. Remember I said that will get rid of any default styles that comes with the different browsers. So this button, for example, looks, this rounded borders and stuff looks like this in Chrome, but in Internet Explorer it's gonna look a little bit different. So we want to get rid of those differences by using that normalized CSS. So the same way we imported our colors, the same way at the beginning of this we want to import that normalized CSS. So it's gonna get all the values from that file will be imported to our styles. So we're gonna do import, and then our normalize.scss is inside the folder vendor, and then normalize.scss. And notice here, in this case, we have to write .scss, so we have to write the extension, because this file normalize is not a partial. We didn't put underscore in front of it. If it was a partial like colors, you see colors have also .scss extension, but because it has underscore, it's called partial. So we don't need to write the extension. The preprocessor tool, Koala, already knows that that's SCSS, so it doesn't. You don't have to write it. So it just kind of help you out a little bit. So here, if I save this, now everything that we copied and downloaded in that SCSS, all that long file, is being imported now, and it's, if we open style.css, we'll see it there. And look, now our style.css is super big. But then if you go to the end of the file, you also will see our stuff. There they are, because this is being written in main.css. So here first it gets that normalized stuff, put them into the file. Then the second gets our colors, put them into the file, and then gets everything that goes after and puts at the end, and then creates one file off of all these different files. So it kind of merge all the files into one file. That's what we are doing right here. So we save that. If we go back and you see the button changed its style. So this is now, this button will look the same way to every browser. While before that, if we go back and comment out this normalize, so these are when you put 2 forward slashes in front, that's a comment. So it's not, it's the browser will not interpret it. It will not render this as a CSS property. So it's just a comment. So we go back here, you see the button looks rounded, and but if we open this in I don't have Internet Explorer on this computer, but if you would have opened this in Internet Explorer, it would probably look more like the one before we saw. It will be like squared or whatever. So we don't want this difference to influence our styles. So that's why it's a very good idea to just import this normalize.css, which sets everything the same, the basic. So this is your starting point for every browser, and from now on we can work on our styles. Make sense, right? So you understand what normalize.css is doing for us. Okay, so right now we said in the colors we define this new variable, primary button variable, which is navy blue at this point, and we want to apply this color to our button that we just created. So we would go to our main.scss and we will write what is the style of this element. The class of this element is button. So we want to point to that. We say button, and then we want to have background color again, and then instead of picking the color, we can now just use this variable that we created, and it's available to us because we import it right here. And you just put that there. Oops, I need it because I didn't. Okay, so primary button. So that's the color, the variable for this color. And if I save this button now will be navy blue, right? But you can see the font, so we need to change color of the font. Say, let's say be white. I save, I go back, and there it is. So another thing that SCSS can do for us, so that was the variable, so I hope it makes sense. It's just replacing the value, but you can reuse it in a lot of places. And then if you want to change this primary button color, you get assignment. They say, okay, we want to replace all our buttons on the site from blue to green. And if you don't use variables, you're gonna have to go and find everywhere you use that color, and you need to replace it to something else. But if you're using variables, you just go, we use partials colors, so we know, okay, here are our colors. It's very easy to find stuff. So it's getting already, makes sense already, with nothing on our page. Can you imagine bigger project? So we're just gonna go here and say, okay, we want this to be green, and boom, it changes its color, right? So if we use this variable in other places, that value will be replaced as well. Another thing that it's useful when working that you can use from Sass is nesting. So for example, let's just create one markup right here inside our box. That first box, let's say we want to create a link, and the link tag is age. The href is like that from, my god, when I change the layout of my hands, I can't type. This from web 1, I hope. So right now we have this link here, and this is the default style. So it gets blue, that ugly blue color, whatever it is, and then it's underscored because it doesn't have any styles. So we want to style this. Before, what would you do in regular CSS? You would have to do now, since this link is inside our box div, right? You see it here. Let's just put that down so you can see a little better. So you see this div has this text and it has this link. So the link A, the tag A, is inside this div. So in regular CSS you would have to find this class, which is that box class, and then you say okay, A, and then you would write color. You want the color to be red, for example. So this will make this color red. But nesting, if you have a lot of elements like that are inside other elements, this you need to write it all in one line, like one next to each other, like A, UR, UL, ULI, and it will be all in one line, and it's not really readable. And if you want to do now hover effect for this, you would have to create a new one that you're gonna rewrite again stuff. You say, I want inside that box every A tag on hover to have color of what is it? What color I should use? Green. So let's save this. When I hover now, it becomes green, right? But what I did here, I'm rewriting stuff again. Okay, so I want my visited color, and visited color is when you click on this link, then becomes like purple. If you know that from your previous work. So what I want to say is I'm rewriting box A every time, right? But let's comment this out so you can still see it. It takes like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines of code. So I'm in SCSS you can do nesting, so I'm gonna do this way. I say okay, I want my box, I open up, so here I nest inside. Visually also I can say okay, every A inside this box I want to have color of red. So this code is the same as this, but it makes a lot more sense visually to me, that I kind of see that A is indented inside box, so it gives me visual clue that I want this color red will be for every A tag inside that box. I hope it makes sense a little bit, this nesting part. This is not possible in regular CSS. If you write it like this in regular CSS, it will not work. But in Sass, you can do this. And what is even better now, I don't have to write that hover effect again. So I just say, okay, inside box, for every A, be red color, but then I can add effects for hover, for visited, for other things. So for example, for hover, I would do it this way. I say and on hover be color. Actually, this have to be nested inside that. Sorry, my bad. So this is nested inside box. So I want inside A now to tell it for the hover effect. So I'm gonna say and hover on hover be color green. So you can see if you in Visual Studio Code, it shows you which bracket closes which one. So right now with the nesting technique, I set color, or I set properties to this A inside box, and I also added hover effect. If I go, it still works, right? But to me, and I hope eventually when you start using it, this nesting will make a lot more sense than just writing it several times to do the same thing, right? And when you have more complex CSS, when you have a lot more styles, now I just can add stuff here, say text decoration none, which will get rid of that underline. And you see I wrote it under that A, but it's not applied to hover, right? So it's gonna inherit, it's gonna have that style already in place. So you see there is no underline there. And then if I want to now do some stuff to this box, I want to change color to something else, or I want to change the height of this box, I will write that under here. So you see how it's nesting like folders, right? So I'm gonna do height 500 pixels. So this now is this property is applied only to box because it's under that. So A, it's doesn't have to do anything with that style. So you see now it's 500 pixels height. So this way, when you start getting more complex styles, this nesting makes sense. So try to use nesting throughout your project. So everything that you were writing before in Web 1 when you learned CSS, regular CSS, now try to nest it. So instead of writing this, write it this way. And as you start adding styles, you'll see that it makes a lot more sense. But this is just basic example how that works. I wanted to show you we are kind of slow. What time is it now? 7:50. So basically we did imports, so you can add more stuff here. So you see I'm writing everything in main.css. That's not really what we want to do here. We don't want to write any styles inside that file. We want here only to list our imports. So for example, this so far all these styles, I'm gonna cut this, I'm gonna take that out. Those are base styles, so that's what we're gonna create another partial for our base styles. And inside our partial folder, we'll create again partials are starting with underscore, and we're gonna call it base and SCSS. And here I'm going to paste all my styles. But now our main.scss that Koala is looking at doesn't know about this partial. So what we need to do is we need to import it. So the same way we did the other ones, inside partial folder, and there it is, our base.scss. When we save, now all these three separate files getting imported here and our Koala will pick that up and make it into that style.css. So we go back, everything is still has all the styles as before. But now our main.css, SCSS is only for importing partials, and then we starting to break up our things apart. So let's say, notice in our base we have this variable defined here, which is default font size. We want to cut that out. We don't want that here. So we want to create a separate place, because later on I'll forget where I declare this variable. I'm not gonna have idea that I put it in this base partial. So I'm gonna create another partial that it's gonna be like variables .scss, and this is where I'm gonna save that. And now what we need to do, we need to import it here. But another gotcha here that can happen, if I import this variable, this file where I declare this default font variable, if I import that after my base style, inside my base I'm using that variable. Where is it? The font size, there it is. So I have to import variables before I'm importing this file where I'm referencing them. Make sense? So if I say, if I'm importing this first, my variable called default font size is not declared yet, because it's being imported after. So I need to always try to import your variables, your colors, all this stuff before your actual styles. So I'm gonna import it here, and that's variables. And in this file from now on, I'm going to save all my variables. And if I need to change something, I know exactly where to go and look for it, and I know exactly where to change it. And then my base is using all of it. It's using variables, it's using colors that I defined in these other files. So I can save this now, and if I go back, everything is still working, because everything is getting linked together, right? My main.scss will load all these partial files, and we can grow these partial files now and write stuff there, and they will all get imported here as a single file. They will all get merged and saved. Koala will make one single file of all that stuff. And if you go back to style.css, look how big this file is. Check this out, like it's growing, right? And we are separating in our work. We are getting ourselves organized. If we didn't do that, we will have to write in this single file all this stuff, and you get lost quickly. So we covered variables, we covered partials, we looked how to import them. We have our Koala running in the background the whole time. So what else?
Why was the partials base at the bottom again? Under the main.scss?
Because it's using variables and colors.
Oh, you're just grouping them that way?
So you have to import variables and
You have to
colors
do that.
first, so our base will know about these things.
Oh, okay.
So right here, if you look in our base, we are calling for this primary button variable. And if we loaded this base before the variables, this value will be unknown, because the file will not know what is that, right? So you need to import that first and then base. So the order is important, right? So if you are using inside this file, if you're using some stuff from this file, you need to load that previous file first. I mean, you will make mistakes. If something doesn't work, that's probably gonna be the case because maybe you used variable that you are loading later on. So you need to load. This order is very important. Another thing are calculations that you can do inside that are not exist that they don't exist in regular CSS. So let's say here our body, you see how it's all to the left side, it doesn't have any spacing, so we want to add some padding, and let me just really quick something. 1 second. So we want to do padding. So here we could write body. We want body to have padding of 2%, for example. But the way we will do that is using variables. So we will create a variable called, let's say you can call it however you want, but one often case you can say you can find is called gather. So we want gather to be 2%, right? That doesn't mean anything right now, but we can use these variables in our rest of our styles. So let's go back to our base and we say, okay, we said that our body, we want to have that padding, we want to have padding of 2%, but we don't want to hard code that. We can now use our variables that we just created called gather. So this gather will be replaced with 2% that we set up here. So now if we go back, we should see 2% of the full width. That's the padding that we are getting there. So I want to say now I want this to be twice as much, but I don't want to hard code anything. I don't want to say 4%, because later they might say, oh, we want 3 times more space. So just to show you the calculation part, here inside the variables I can still have my gather, but I can create a new variable that it's called double gather, right? And now I don't want to say 4%. I want to say that this double gather to be always twice as much as my gather. So I can now say 2 times and then gather, right? So now when they say we want bigger padding, my double gather will automatically adjust as well, right? I don't have to worry about this variable anymore because it will always be twice as bigger as the other one. So if I go back now and say in my base and I say instead of gather, I want to be double gather. In this case now will be 4%. But if I go back and just change that gather variable to 3%, or let's say more 5%, now my double gather will be 10%, right? And if I go here, you see it pushed everything up and down 10%. And this is very useful for small screens, because what is that percent? It's percent of the width of the page. So if it's small screen, 2% is less, right? Than the big screen, 2% is a little bigger chunk of space. So, but the proportion will always be same. So it's a good way to use percentages instead of fixed pixels. So that's you cannot do this in CSS. So this is only possible if you use Sass. So that's a very good thing. You can do calculations on some other stuff, whatever you come up with. You can do calculations on width, you can use it anywhere pretty much. This is just example so you can see how that can be done. And I guess we'll have to cover some other functionality of Sass as we go later. I think that's pretty much. I think that's enough for now. I hope it gave you idea what Sass is and why it's different than CSS and how it can help us to get our files organized into folders. And as you start writing your styles more and more and it's getting bigger, you'll see actually you're gonna start experience that value of using Sass instead of regular CSS. So any questions? You guys might be confused a little bit right now, but I hope it makes a little bit sense as for the first time. Does it? Or you don't completely, good? Okay. I will try it out, try it in your projects, try to import the files, try to start writing some styles for your project, and try to use, instead of using colors, define them into your variables like this here. Just list them one after another, and then use those variable names when you go to your base. Instead of using that color, use that variable name, and just keep doing that. And you'll see later on when you need that same color, you don't need to go and find that value, you just use the variable. So just try to do that for next time. In the module here, you have listed the structure, it's listed here. So you can set this up and start adding things to it as we go. We will cover this all next time. For now, do it the same way as we did it here. Next time, I will show you where this all can be useful, and we'll go from there. We'll cover a little more stuff. From now on, we'll all do Sass. We will not do regular CSS, so we will do always nesting and variables. So get yourself familiar with that stuff. It's not hard, just try it out and you'll see. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And the video will be up by tomorrow, I hope. So